All right, testing 1, 2, 3. That was crazy. So there was a young lady that left a comment or a question for me as I talked about my involvement working in Bridgeport with troubled youth or at-risk youth, as they were labeled, many of which were involved in gang activity. And so she asked me to talk about how the police, their interaction with the youth, oftentimes led to them being arrested and things of that nature. This is a large topic, and I'm going to try and keep this as short as possible. I think today what I'll do is talk about the first thing that I learned when I went to a gang training that really opened my eyes to that culture, that lifestyle. And so there were several things that impacted me during that very first training that I wasn't expecting. It opened my eyes to a whole new world around me. And so just real brief, I worked in Bridgeport for 12 years. I originally went in as part of a pre-employment program, so it was not a gang program. Our job was to get our children prepared to go into the workforce, so that's pre-employment, working on soft skills and things of that nature, developing resumes and work experience, things of this nature to get them prepared to transition into the workforce. Our children were ages 13 to 23. Majority of our kids, though, were about 15 coming into the program, 15, 16 years old. We had a few older, but most of them had transitioned. They had been with us for many years as they got older. And I remember having been there, being there, I worked for several years at this point where a training comes up and they asked me, it was required for us to do training, but we could pretty much choose whatever we want. There was a gang training available and I had an interest. I figured I'd just check it out. And of course I went in naively thinking that none of my kids were involved in gangs. I didn't see anything that kind of presented that lifestyle to me to assume any of my children were involved in that lifestyle. And so I entered into the program, well, the class. It was a one-day class. And they went through the explanation. There was 2 parole officers that were there, and they began to break down the different gangs. And of course, my assumption was, I was familiar with the Latin Kings, familiar with Crips, Bloods, but they kind of presented names like Folk Nation and things of that nature, which I was not familiar with. They went through the history of the gangs, and the first thing that really shocked me, and now mind you, this is about 20 years ago, so I don't know if these numbers are still relevant today. I don't know if they're still accurate today or not, but what caught my attention, the first thing they said was that they have what's called hybrid gangs. I had never heard that term, and apparently these are gangs that are not a part of Folk Nation. They're not a part of the Latin Kings, but they still adhere to the gang code. There's a Bible that they all adhere to, a set of rules that they all kind of live by. And so these hybrid gangs still live by the gang code. And what shocked me was the number of gangs. They said at the time, I think they said it was about 36 or 38 gangs that they had identified in the city of Bridgeport. And so that was mind-blowing to me. So now they go through the training and they begin to explain to us how many of these kids are recruited and they're selected at young ages. And what's interesting is the process of selection. A child that comes from a 2-family home may not be selected. They try to choose those that are from broken homes, those that are in need of family, camaraderie, safety, things of that nature. And so they know how to prey on the youth to figure out which ones would fit in for what they need. What I learned was a lot of those running the gangs, these are older individuals. I say individuals because they could be male or female, but mostly men. A lot of them live in the suburbs, so they don't even live in the city. They got these young kids working for them. They're their soldiers, putting in work on the street, making money for them. And it's really it's organized crime. And I think that thing hit me because I had never really thought of gangs. How you doing? I never thought of gangs or as being organized crime in the sense that there really is a structure in place. It's organized in the whatever they're engaged in. It's all illegal activity. The goal is to make money. Whether they're stealing cars, whether they're moving, drugs, pills, heroin, cocaine, whatever. There's a hierarchy to it. It's a real system that's in place, like a business structure. And so a lot of these OGs, those that run the gangs, they live out in the suburbs. These are pillars in communities. They own businesses, things of that nature. It's incredible. You would never know that these are people that have their hand in the inner city making money off these young children. The second thing or maybe third thing that caught my attention was the age of the kids. They recruit them as young as elementary school. And so now by 15, 16 years old, they've been in it for years. You're talking about 6, 7 years of being indoctrinated into this system, into this way of life. They have meetings daily, so they might meet 3, 4 times a week, where the mindset is being reaffirmed, and this is a way of life, a way of thinking. This is how things are done, and this becomes their lifestyle. This becomes really all they know. So by the time that we get them at this point, 15, 16 years old, it's kind of hard to begin changing their mindset because they've been indoctrinated for so many years. I think the last thing, the thing that impressed me, they had shared a story of a 8-year-old kid. He was a part of, I can't remember exactly which gang he was a part of, but his probation officer, that child had come to her and said, I really need to get out of this. It's time for me to kind of move on. You're talking about, a child that's like 11, 12 years old. And basically, the only way out of the gang was, of course, they either take a bullet or they take the beat down. And of course, the danger of taking the bullet is you hit something vital, you have the potential of dying. And so the suggestion was, listen, just take the beat down, or do what you got to do to get out now, because it's better at this point to get out than down the road where you have the potential of losing your life, on the street. And so the young man did what he had to do in order to get out of the gang. But to me, 8-year-old kids, 9-year-old kids shouldn't have to be making these decisions. And that was something that really caught me off guard, that I never thought kids of that age were being recruited or being, brought into these type of lifestyles and indoctrinated at such a young age. And so I was looking at my youth now, 15, 16 years old, to come in and begin to break their mindsets and change the way that they think, the way they process, was going to be a lot more difficult than what I ever would have imagined. As they went through the training, they began showing us different things, because it's not about the clothing. They don't wear flags. It was different things that we had to be mindful of and begin to look for. Some of the language used, sometimes the way they would write. So they said if you watch like their Facebook posts, this was back when they were all on Facebook at this time, messaging each other, I would see their posts, and sometimes they would use numbers instead of letters. I couldn't understand what I was reading. I would ask them questions, they wouldn't answer me. So now at this point during the training, I'm realizing a lot of what they're explaining, I had actually witnessed and saw. And so for the first time, I'm realizing that, oh my God, a lot of my kids are involved with gangs. And so the point of the training was for us to take this information, to go back to the program and begin pulling the kids out of this lifestyle, to identify who's who and what's what. And it was definitely a real eye-opener. When I got back to the program, I realized how many of them were a part of this lifestyle. Many of them do not talk about it. They won't. It's somewhat secretive. It's very secretive. But if they can confide in you and realize that you kind of have a sense of what's going on, they do start to open up, which a lot of them did. And so I got a lot of stories. I won't take the time today to go through the stories. But it definitely was an eye-opener for me. I think I struggled this week as the racial topic has become first and foremost. I'm on YouTube a lot, and I'm realizing a lot of the comments, people really do believe that gang culture is synonymous with Black America, and that's not true. Gang culture is a whole different lifestyle. There's a lot of races a part of these gangs, and they all live by the same code. So don't ever assume just because a person is Black that they're involved with gangs. I don't like the fact that Chicago and Detroit are both pointed to as the example of Black America, which is not true. It's not the case. We have a lot of people of diversity amongst us, amongst the Black community. We're not all drug addicts. We're not all poor. We're not all uneducated. There's a lot of diversity, as there is with any group in America. And so, but I want to just throw this video together real quick. If you got any questions, just leave them in the post. I'll answer them about anything that I might have said, or anything that you got a question regarding that I might not have mentioned that you're like, hey, because I was involved with this for about 12 years. So I saw a lot of things firsthand. I saw the relationship between Bridgeport police and a lot of my youth. which left a lot to be desired. They were not building a sense of security and safety with our youth. They were really destroying a relationship, and so that's something we could probably talk a little more about. How I've watched kids getting pushed into the system because of their interaction with the police. But hopefully this was answer some of your questions that was asked there in that post. And talk to you later.